The wind howled across the barren land like a wounded beast, carrying with it icy flakes that cut the skin like knives. The alien mother clutched her child close to her chest, her thin arms trembling as much from fear as from the cold. She had nothing left. Not food, not shelter, not even the clothes on her back. The last of her garments had already been fed to the fire, each piece torn away with shaking hands, each cloth burned only for moments. But those brief flames had kept her child alive a little longer. Her child, small and fragile, whimpered softly. His lips were pale, his tiny fingers stiff. She rocked him gently, whispering words she no longer believed herself. "It will be all right, my little one. Just hold on a little longer." Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to sound strong. The night stretched endless, darker than any she had known. Stars above glittered like frozen shards, but they gave no warmth. The fire had died some time ago, leaving only faint embers glowing weakly. She stared at them with desperate eyes, wishing she could will them back to life. But ashes cannot burn twice. She pressed her child tighter against her bare chest, giving him the last heat of her body. Her skin turned numb, her breath a white fog in the air. Each heartbeat felt heavier, slower. The cold whispered lies into her ears, lies that told her to close her eyes, to rest, to let go. But each time her head dipped, the weak cry of her child pulled her back. His life was bound to hers, and she would not let death take him while she still breathed. She lifted her head, scanning the snowy emptiness around her, hoping for some miracle. But there was only silence, only the endless storm. She remembered the faces of her people, how they turned away when she begged for help. They said she was cursed, unworthy, and left her to the wilds. Her people believed strength was everything. Nang and weakness deserved no mercy. She had once been proud among them, but pride could not feed her child, nor shield him from the cold. She had sacrificed everything, yet still the night wanted more. Her child stirred, eyes fluttering open for a moment. His weak voice called out, "Mama." She bit her lip hard to stop the sob that threatened to escape. She smiled instead, though her heart broke. "I'm here, always here," she whispered. Her tears froze on her cheeks as soon as they fell. The snow thickened, falling harder, coating the ground around her in a white blanket. She thought bitterly that the world was mocking her, giving her snow when all she needed was fire. Every breath burned in her chest. Every second felt like her last. She tried to imagine the warmth of the sun, but the memory slipped away, stolen by the cold. Her knees buckled and she almost fell, but she forced herself to remain upright. If she fell, her child would fall with her. If she gave up, then the last bit of hope in this frozen night would vanish. She looked up to the sky again, her lips moving in silent prayer. Prayer not for herself, but for her child. She prayed for someone, anyone, to see them, to help them, to save the little life in her arms. The wind answered with a long, lonely howl. The mother lowered her head, her hair frozen stiff. Her body shook, her skin raw and red from the cold. She closed her eyes for a moment, listening to her child's faint breathing. It was weak but steady, and that was enough to keep her alive a little longer. The frozen night stretched without mercy. Her heart whispered that no dawn would come for them. Yet she refused to surrender. For as long as her child's chest rose and fell, the mother would endure the cold, naked, hopeless but unbroken. The night dragged on, endless and cruel. The alien mother could no longer feel her toes. Her legs were stiff like stone. She shifted the child in her arms, trying to block the wind with her own body, but the storm pushed against them without mercy. The last fire was long gone, the ashes now buried under snow, and with it, her final piece of hope seemed to fade away. Her child whimpered again, weaker this time, his eyes half closed, his breath shallow. She shook him gently, whispering, "Stay with me, please, don't leave me." Her words trembled as they left her lips. Fear filled her chest like ice, sharper than the cold outside. She had seen it before, small ones losing warmth, slipping into silence that never returned. She would not let that happen to her child, not while she still drew breath. She pulled him close, pressing her lips against his forehead. Her skin burned with cold, but she refused to let go. Every heartbeat told her she was running out of time. She remembered the moment she had torn her last garment and set it aflame. Her hands had trembled then too, but she had smiled at her child. She pretended the fire would last, that tomorrow would be better. Now tomorrow seemed so far away. The land was silent except for the storm. No birds, no beasts, no sound of life. Only the crunch of snow shifting under the wind. She lifted her head and scanned the horizon again, searching for movement. But there was nothing, just shadows and white emptiness. Her throat ached with thirst, her stomach hollow, but hunger no longer mattered. Only warmth, only survival for the little one in her arms. Her people's voices echoed in her mind, cold and cruel. "The weak have no place among us," they had said. They had pushed her away, turned their backs when she begged. She had walked away in shame, but now she walked in desperation. And still the cold followed her, stripping her dignity, piece by piece. She lowered her head, whispering bitterly, "Was I a fool to believe we could survive?" The child stirred again, coughing weakly. That sound tore through her heart. She cradled his head against her shoulder, rocking him as if motion alone could bring warmth. "Just hold on, little one. I'll find a way," she promised, though her voice cracked. She tried to believe her own words, but the emptiness around her gave no answer. Suddenly her knees buckled and she fell into the snow. The weight of exhaustion pressed down on her. Her arms trembled as she clutched the child, shielding him from the cold ground. She lay there for a moment, breathing hard, watching her breath rise into the air like fading smoke. Her body screamed for rest, but she knew rest was death. She forced herself up again, dragging her feet through the snow. Her bare skin stung, her legs wobbled. Every step was a battle. Her vision blurred, stars danced in her eyes. She whispered to herself, "One more step, just one more," repeating it again and again. It was all she had left to keep moving, but the truth pressed heavy on her heart. She had nothing left to give, no fire, no food, no strength. The child's breaths were too shallow, and her own body was too weak. The night had won, and hope was slipping away with each passing moment. Her tears fell silently, freezing before they reached her chin. She leaned against a snow-covered rock, clutching her child. She looked up at the dark sky, whispering one last plea to whoever might hear, "If anyone sees us, please, save my child." The storm howled in reply, uncaring and merciless. The mother closed her eyes for a moment, her head lowering as her strength drained. She thought the end had finally come. Yet deep inside, a tiny spark of will refused to die completely. The last hope might be gone, but she still clung to one truth: if she moved, she would fall fighting for her child, not surrendering to the night. The storm had not ended, but something changed in the silence of the night. The alien mother sat slumped against the frozen rock, her arms wrapped tight around her child. She thought she had heard everything the wilderness could give: the cry of wind, the shifting snow, the endless howl of emptiness. But then, a new sound reached her ears, footsteps, slow and heavy, crushing the snow with weight. At first, she thought it was her mind playing tricks. Cold often brought voices, sounds, even visions that weren't real. She closed her eyes tighter, whispering, "Ignore it. There is no one." Yet the sound grew closer, steady, purposeful. Her heart pounded wildly. Fear struck her, sharper than the storm. If it was a beast, they were both finished. If it was her own people, they would drag her child away and leave her to die. She tightened her hold, baring her teeth like a cornered animal. She had nothing to fight with, but she would not give up her child without resistance. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment the world froze with her. She dared to lift her head. Her blurred vision cleared just enough to see a figure standing a short distance away, tall and broad, wrapped in thick layers against the cold. A light glowed faintly in his hand, a lantern, bright and warm against the endless dark. Her breath caught. It was not one of her kind. The face was strange, features different, and the eyes, human. The alien mother's blood turned to ice. She had heard stories of humans, dangerous wanderers, unpredictable. Some called them merciful, others called them killers. Which one stood before her now? The man did not move at first. He only stared, lantern light flickering across the snow between them. His gaze fell on her trembling body and the small child in her arms. She pulled the child closer, shielding him with her bare skin. Her voice cracked with both fear and defiance. "Stay back." The man slowly raised one hand, palm open, showing he carried no weapon. His voice was low, steady, and strangely gentle against the roar of the storm. "I won't hurt you," he said. The alien mother blinked, shocked. She had expected cruelty, perhaps mockery, but not calm words. The child whimpered, his small body shaking harder. The human's eyes softened. He stepped forward, careful and slow, each movement deliberate. From his pack, he pulled out a thick blanket, worn but warm-looking. He knelt and placed it gently in the snow, pushing it toward her. His voice carried again, "For him." The mother stared at the blanket as though it were a trap. Her lips trembled. Should she trust him? Could she trust him? Every lesson her people taught told her no. Trust was weakness, help was a lie. But her child shivered violently against her chest, his faint breaths calling louder than her fears. Her hands shook as she reached out, dragging the blanket toward her. She wrapped it around her child first, pressing him into the warmth. A weak sigh escaped his lips, and for the first time in days, his small body stopped shaking. Tears blurred her eyes as relief washed through her. The human watched in silence, his face unreadable. Then he spoke again. "There's shelter not far from here. Come with me, you'll freeze out here." His words were simple yet filled with urgency. The mother shook her head, clutching her child tighter. Why? Why would you help us? She whispered. Her voice was suspicious, broken. The man didn't hesitate. He looked at her as if the answer was obvious. Because no one deserves to die out here, not while I can help. Her chest tightened. Her people never spoke words like that. Mercy was foreign to them. Yet here was a stranger, a human, offering life without asking for anything in return. She hesitated, torn between fear and hope. Her lips moved, silently whispering to her child, "What should I do?" The storm howled around them, but in that moment, a fragile choice appeared. Either stay and let the night finish what it had begun, or follow this human into the unknown. Her child stirred weakly, his tiny hand gripping her chest, and that was her answer. With shaking legs, she stood, still holding her child. Her eyes never left the human, fear and trust battling inside her. Finally, she gave a single nod. The man's lantern flickered brighter as he turned, beckoning her to follow, and in the frozen night, the alien mother took her first step toward the one who might save them both. The alien mother followed the human through the storm, her bare feet sinking into the snow with each step. Every muscle in her body screamed to stop, but she clung to her child and forced herself forward. The human walked ahead with slow, steady steps, holding the lantern high. Its glow painted a golden path in the endless white. For a moment, she wondered if this was all a dream. Perhaps she had already collapsed in the snow, and this was the vision before death. But the crunch of snow beneath her feet and the weight of her child in her arms told her it was real. A strange warmth flickered inside her, not from the storm but from the possibility that survival was no longer impossible. The human stopped at last, pushing open a wooden door half buried by snow. A dim light spilled out, carrying with it the smell of smoke and warmth. The mother froze at the doorway, clutching her child protectively. Fear whispered that stepping inside was surrender. She had always been taught that shelter from another came with a price. The human glanced back, his breath rising in clouds. "Come in," he said simply. His voice was firm, not demanding, as though it was her choice. Slowly, with trembling steps, she crossed the threshold. Inside, the air was warmer. Her frozen skin stung as the heat touched it. A fire crackled in the corner, throwing sparks into the air. The little cabin was small, built from rough wood, but to her weary eyes it looked like a palace. The child stirred in her arms, a tiny whimper escaping his lips as he felt the warmth. The human set down his lantern and moved to the fire, adding another log. Flames leapt higher, filling the cabin with light. He pulled a chair closer and gestured for her to sit. She shook her head, backing into the corner, her body pressed against the wall. Still, her eyes darted to the fire again and again, desperate for its heat. The man didn't argue. He moved slowly, pulling a second blanket from his pack. He laid it on the floor between them, keeping his distance. His hands remained open and empty. He spoke softly. "He needs more warmth. Let him rest." The mother's lips parted, but no words came. Her chest rose and fell as she fought her instincts. After a long silence, she sank down onto the blanket, curling her child against her chest. The fire's glow touched them both, and for the first time in many nights, her child's breathing began to steady. The silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of firewood. The human sat across from them, his eyes on the flames, not on her. It unsettled her. She expected stares, judgment, or demand, but instead he treated her as though she were invisible, free to choose when to speak. Finally, her voice cracked through the silence. "Why? Why are you doing this?" She hated how small and weak her words sounded. The man lifted his gaze, meeting her eyes for the first time. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was calm. "Because you and your child deserve to live. That's enough reason." Her heart twisted. She searched his face for cruelty, for lies, but found none. Her people never offered kindness without cost. Yet this stranger, this human, had given her more than she thou. Which possible? Warmth, safety, dignity? Her eyes burned with tears, but she held them back. She would not cry in front of him. Instead, she pressed her lips to her child's forehead, whispering, "Rest now, little one. You are safe." The child's small hand curled into her chest as he drifted into a peaceful sleep. For the first time in what felt like forever, the alien mother leaned back, her eyes heavy. The fire's warmth wrapped around her, and though fear still lingered, hope, fragile, unfamiliar hope, began to bloom quietly in her heart. And as the storm raged outside, the cabin stood as a fragile barrier protecting them from death, a place of warmth, and perhaps the beginning of something she had never dared to believe in before: trust. The fire's warmth filled the small cabin, yet the alien mother's body still trembled from exhaustion. Her child stirred in her arms, his lips dry, his breathing shallow. He needed more than heat. He needed strength, food, something to keep him alive. The mother's stomach ached too, but her hunger was nothing compared to the emptiness she felt for her child. The human moved quietly, his steps calm on the wooden floor. He opened a small cupboard near the wall and pulled out a pot. The sound of metal against wood made her flinch. She hugged her child tighter, her eyes sharp with suspicion. "What are you doing?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. The man glanced back, his tone steady. "Cooking. You both need food." He placed the pot near the fire and poured water into it. The mother blinked, stunned. No one had ever prepared food for her before without expecting something in return. The scent of dried herbs and grains soon mixed with the smoke of the fire. The smell made her throat tighten, reminding her how long it had been since she last tasted real food. Her child whimpered again, turning his head weakly against her chest. His tiny mouth opened as if searching for something. Gee, her heart broke at the sight. She brushed his hair with trembling fingers and whispered, "Soon, little one, soon." Though inside she feared it was another lie, the human stirred the pot slowly, the steam rising into the air. His movements were simple, practical, but to her eyes they seemed almost magical. To create warmth and food so easily, it was a power she did not understand. After a while, he ladled the soup into a small wooden bowl. He placed it carefully on the floor, sliding it toward her. "Eat," he said quietly. His voice carried no demand, only calm insistence. The mother's eyes darted between the bowl and the man. Fear coiled inside her. Was it poisoned? Was it a trick to weaken her further? She had lived too long in a world where kindness was a mask for cruelty. Still, her child stirred again, whimpering softly. His frail body begged for nourishment she could not give. With trembling hands, she dipped her fingers into the warm liquid, tasting it carefully. The flavor was simple, earthy, safe. Relief swept through her. She lifted the bowl and touched it to her child's lips. The little one sipped weakly, then again, and soon his small mouth began to move with hunger. Tears blurred her eyes as she fed him slowly, watching color return to his cheeks. The man watched from across the fire, saying nothing. His silence felt strange, heavy, but not threatening. When the child had finished, the mother finally took a sip herself. The warmth spread down her throat, filling the hollow ache in her belly. It was not much, but it was life. She looked at the man over the rim of the bowl, suspicion still lingering. "Why?" she asked again, her voice low. "Why give us food? What do you want from me?" Her tone was sharp, defensive. She needed to hear the truth. The man's eyes met hers, steady as stone. "Nothing," he replied. "I want nothing from you." His gaze flicked to the sleeping child in her arms. "But he deserves a chance to live, and so do you." The mother's heart pounded. The word struck her harder than any blade. No bargain, no price, only a gift freely given. It made no sense, and yet it was the only thing keeping her child alive at that moment. She lowered her head, unable to speak. She had begged her own people for mercy and been cast aside. Yet here, in the warmth of a stranger's cabin, her child slept with food in his belly. Her hands shook as she stroked her child's hair, whispering, "You will live, my little one. You will live." The storm still raged outside, but inside the cabin, there was a fragile peace. For the first time in countless nights, the alien mother felt something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. The cabin was warm, yet the alien mother could not rest. She sat near the fire with her child in her arms, his tiny chest rising and falling softly. He had eaten, he had warmth, but her heart still raced as if the storm outside had crept into her chest. The shadows cast by the flames stretched long across the wooden walls, each one moving like a predator waiting to strike. She glanced toward the human. He had finished his meal and sat on the other side of the fire. His back leaned against the wall. His eyes were half closed, his face calm. He looked like a man who had no reason to fear, no reason to run. But she did. Fear was all she knew. Every story she had heard about humans clawed at her mind. Some said humans were merciful, but many others said they were cunning, cruel, quick to demand repayment. What if this one was only waiting for her to sleep so he could take her child away? Her grip tightened around her son until he stirred uncomfortably. She whispered softly, "It's all right, little one. I will not let anyone harm you." The fire popped, making her jump. Her breath caught, and she realized her entire body was trembling. The warmth was on her skin, but the fear froze her heart from within. Slowly, her eyes moved back to the man. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. He was asleep. The silence pressed against her, and her thoughts grew darker. This was her chance to escape. She could slip out the door, vanish into the night before he even opened his eyes. She imagined herself running into the storm, the snow biting her bare feet again, the wind clawing at her skin. Her child would not survive that. She knew it. She shook her head, whispering, "No, not again." But another thought pressed in. What if he woke and demanded something she could not give? Food, labor, or worse? Her people always demanded a price. Why would this human be different? She looked at her child, his face finally peaceful. His small hand rested on her chest, clinging to her even in his dreams. Could she risk destroying that fragile piece? Her eyes burned as she stared at the fire. Memories came rushing back. Memories of betrayal, of her kin turning their backs on her when she begged for help, of hands that shoved her away, voices that cursed her for being weak. Her lips quivered as she whispered, "Trust is death." The human shifted in his sleep, and her heart leapt to her throat. She pressed herself against the wall, clutching her child tighter. Her breathing quickened. She expected him to rise, to reveal his hidden cruelty. But he didn't. He only turned to his side, pulling his cloak tighter around himself. Minutes crawled by. The fire dimmed to glowing embers. She could not close her eyes, not even for a heartbeat. The shadows twisted and stretched across the walls, and in them she saw shapes from her fears. Faces of her people, the storm's teeth, the endless emptiness of the wild. She blinked hard, shaking her head to chase them away, but they returned each time the flame shifted. Her child whimpered in his sleep, and she bent her head quickly, humming a soft tune to calm him. The sound broke the silence, fragile but real. It soothed her as much as it soothed him. When she raised her eyes again, she found the human watching her. He was awake now. His gaze was steady, not sharp, not cruel, just calm. "You should sleep," he said quietly. His voice carried no demand, only suggestion. She froze, her throat dry. Did he not know she had spent the whole night trembling in fear of him? "I can't," she whispered. Her voice was small, almost lost in the crackle of the fire. The man nodded slowly, as if he understood. He leaned back again, closing his eyes. "Then rest your heart. No one will harm you here." His words lingered in the air long after silence returned. The alien mother lowered her head to her child, pressing her lips gently to his hair. She still did not trust him fully. The shadows of fear still clung to her soul, but in that moment she realized something. Fear had not driven her from the cabin. Hope had kept her inside. And though the storm raged outside, inside there was a fragile thread tying her to this strange human. She did not know if it would hold, but for tonight she chose not to run. Morning light crept through the small cracks of the cabin walls, pale and cold. The storm outside had weakened, leaving behind a white silence. The alien mother stirred, her body stiff from sitting upright all night. Her child still slept in her arms, his breath stronger than before. His tiny face no longer carried the same painful strain of hunger and cold. Her eyes slowly lifted toward the human. He was awake already, crouched near the fire, carefully placing more wood into the flames. The way he moved was quiet, deliberate, as if he did not want to disturb her or the child. She watched him in silence, her chest tight. He turned slightly, noticing her gaze, and for the first time she saw his face clearly in the light of day. His skin weathered from years in the cold, his eyes sharp, yet strangely gentle. He looked nothing like her people, yet there was something in his expression she recognized. It resolve, a strength that did not need to shout to be real. The human reached into a chest beside the wall and pulled out folded fabric. He walked a few steps closer, stopping at a distance. His voice was calm. "These should fit you." He set the clothes down carefully on a chair and stepped back again, keeping the space between them. The mother stared at the clothes, her lips parting in disbelief. She had burned her last rags to keep her child warm. Shame and humiliation still weighed heavy in her heart. And now here he was, offering her something of his own. "Why?" she asked softly, her voice cracking. "Why give this to me?" He looked at her child before answering. "Because you shouldn't have to suffer just to keep him alive. Take them. You need them more than I do." The mother's hands trembled. She wanted to refuse, to guard her pride, but when her child stirred and pressed his face against her bare skin, she knew she couldn't. With hesitant fingers, she reached for the clothes. They were rough and simple, but to her they felt like armor. Slowly, she dressed herself, her movements awkward with the child still in her arms. When she was covered again, a strange relief washed through her. Not just warmth, but dignity she thought she had lost forever. She lifted her eyes toward the human, whispering, "You gave me back what I thought was gone." He shook his head lightly. "I gave you nothing you didn't already deserve." Her throat tightened at his words. No one from her own kind had ever spoken to her that way. She had been cast out, stripped of value, told she was worthless. Yet here was this stranger, this human, telling her she deserved to live. Silence settled for a moment, broken only by the fire's crackle and the distant groan of wind outside. Then the child stirred, his eyes opening weakly. For the first time in days, he did not cry. Instead, his small lip curved into the faintest smile. The human's expression softened as he saw it. He crouched lower, careful not to frighten them. His hand reached toward the child but stopped halfway, as if waiting for permission. The mother's breath caught, her instincts screaming to pull her son away. Yet the warmth in her son's smile gave her pause. She nodded slowly, allowing the man closer. The human extended one finger, and the child's tiny hand wrapped around it with surprising strength. The man chuckled softly, a sound warm and honest. He's strong. He'll make it. Tears filled the mother's eyes. She held her child close, overwhelmed by relief. In that moment, she realized the truth. This man had chosen to protect them, to give them a chance when no one else would, not for reward, not for gain, but simply because it was right. The human's choice was clear. He had no intention of abandoning them to the cold world outside. And as the fire glowed brighter, the alien mother whispered silently to herself, "Maybe trust isn't death. Maybe trust is life." For the first time, the shadows of fear inside her began to fade, replaced by a fragile light. The fire glowed steady inside the cabin, and the storm outside had grown quiet. Snow still blanketed the land, but in the warmth of the small wooden home, life stirred again. The alien mother sat near the fire, her child nestled in her arms. His cheeks carried a faint color now, a sign that hope had not abandoned them. She lifted her gaze toward the human, who was busy repairing a crack in the wooden wall. He worked with calm focus, his movements steady. She watched him for a long while, trying to understand him. Why was he helping? Why had he given his food, his warmth, even his clothes without asking for anything? The question sat heavy in her mind, yet her heart dared not push it too far. The child stirred, his small hands flexing as though reaching for something. The mother leaned down, whispering gently, "I'm here, little one. You're safe." His eyes blinked open, not filled with tears this time, but with a quiet wonder. And then, to her shock, his lips curved upward, his first true smile in many dark nights. Her breath caught. She had almost forgotten what his smile looked like. For so long, she had seen only fear and weakness in his face. Yet now, here it was, bright, fragile, pure. Tears blurred her vision as she kissed his forehead, whispering, "Thank you, my son, for showing me this light again." The child's laughter came next, soft, broken, but real. It rang through the cabin like music. The human paused in his work, turning to look. His lips twitched into a faint smile as well. "That's a strong sound," he said quietly. "He'll be all right." The mother held her child tighter, her heart swelling. That simple smile had more power than any fire. It was proof that life still clung to them, that perhaps tomorrow was no longer just a cruel promise. She looked across the fire at the human, her voice low. "He hasn't smiled in days, not until now." The man nodded, settling back down near the fire. "Children don't forget how to smile," he said. "They just need a reason again." His words struck her deeply. She lowered her gaze, realizing that she had almost stolen that reason from her child by surrendering to despair. The boy reached out suddenly, his tiny hand stretching toward the human. His laughter bubbled again as if asking him to come closer. The mother stiffened for a moment, unsure, but the man did not force it. He only extended his hand slowly, waiting. The child grasped his finger and held it tight, giggling with delight. The sound filled the cabin with warmth far greater than the fire. The mother's chest ached, not from fear but from something else, something she hadn't felt in so long. She realized she was watching her. Child trust, watching him find joy even in the presence of a stranger. Her lips trembled, and she whispered more to herself than to anyone else. "I had nothing left to give him, and yet here he is, smiling again." The human's eyes met hers across the fire, steady and kind. "Sometimes," he said softly, "all a child needs is to see their mother still fighting for them." Her breath hitched at his words. She pressed her forehead against her child's hair, holding back tears. Was she still fighting, or had she only survived because of this human's mercy? The thought frightened her, but also gave her a strange strength. The child's laughter filled the cabin once more, echoing against the wooden walls. The storm outside could rage again, the cold could return, but inside these walls, something had been born that the frost could never touch. Hope, fragile but alive, carried in the sound of a child's smile, and for the first time, the alien mother let herself believe that perhaps they were no longer alone. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind a white silence. Snow piled high around the little cabin, the morning light glinting on the frozen land like shards of glass. Inside, warmth filled the air, and for the first time in days, the alien mother allowed herself to breathe without fear. Her child laughed softly as he tugged on her sleeve, his tiny voice murmuring half-formed words. The sound filled her heart, but it also left her uneasy. Happiness was fragile, like thin ice, and she knew the world beyond the cabin had not forgotten her. She sat close to the fire, watching the flames, when a sudden sound cracked through the stillness. A sharp crunch of boots on snow, heavy and purposeful. Her heart froze. She knew those footsteps, the rhythm, the weight. They did not belong to the human. He was already inside, sitting across the fire repairing a piece of wood. Her arms tightened around her child instinctively, pressing him close to her. Sue. Hest. The human noticed her sudden stillness. His head turned sharply toward the door. His eyes narrowed, listening. Another sound followed. The muffled voices of men outside, rough and familiar to her ears. Her stomach dropped. Her people, she whispered, trembling. They've come. They found me. The human rose to his feet without hesitation. His calm expression hardened into steel. He walked toward the door, his heavy coat brushing the floorboards. The mother's voice broke as she called out, "No, you don't understand. They'll kill you if you stand in their way." But he didn't stop. His voice was firm, steady. "And they'll take you and your child if I don't." The door rattled violently, fists pounding against the wood. A voice shouted in her tongue, harsh and commanding, "Outcast, give up the child and your life may yet be spared." The mother's blood turned to ice. They weren't here for her. They were here for her son. Her grip tightened so fiercely her arms ached. The human opened the door a crack, stepping outside into the biting cold. The mother scrambled to her feet, pressing herself to the wall, fear choking her throat. She could not see the men, but she could hear them, their snarling voices, the clatter of weapons. Through the gap, she heard the human's voice, calm but carrying like iron. "You'll find no one here to claim. Leave now." The men laughed, cruel and sharp. "You dare stand against us, human? That woman and her brat are ours by law. Step aside and perhaps we'll let you keep your skin." The mother's knees shook violently. Her people never bluffed. They would cut him down and drag her son away. She clutched her child close, whispering desperately, "Please, please, don't let them take you." Then came silence. Deep, heavy silence. And when the human spoke again, his voice was like stone. "No law gives you the right to steal life, not while I stay shopashis. Will breathe. If you want them, you'll have to go through me." Her breath caught. The words struck her like fire. He was choosing them, choosing to stand against her people for the sake of a woman and child he barely knew. She pressed her forehead to her child's hair, tears sliding down her cheeks. Outside, angry voices rose, weapons drawn. The clash was near. She expected the door to burst open at any moment, her nightmare returning. Yet even in her terror, a strange warmth grew in her chest. He had made his choice. He was not running, not surrendering. He had chosen to fight for them. The child whimpered against her, sensing the tension. The mother rocked him gently, whispering, "Hush, little one. We are not alone anymore." Her words shook with fear, but also with belief. The door remained closed. The shouts outside grew louder. And in the center of it all, the human stood tall, unyielding as the frozen earth itself. The storm may have passed, but a new battle had arrived, one that would decide if hope survived the morning. The shouting outside shook the cabin walls. Each word was a threat, each voice sharp with anger. The alien mother clutched her child to her chest, her heart racing as if it would tear through her ribs. Her people had come to claim them, and she knew they would not leave without blood. The human stood at the door, his back straight, his figure blocking the faint morning light. He did not look back at her, yet his voice carried strength that steadied her trembling hands. "Stay behind me," he said firmly. "I won't let them take you." The door shuddered as fists pounded again. Then silence fell, the kind of silence before a strike. The mother held her breath, her child whimpering softly in her arms. And then, with sudden force, the door swung open. Cold air rushed in, carrying with it 3 armed figures, their eyes cruel and hungry. They froze for only a moment, surprised to see a human standing guard. Their leader sneered, "Step aside, outsider. This doesn't concern you." The human did not move, his shoulders squared, his eyes hard. "It concerns me the moment you threaten a mother and her child. Leave now." The intruders laughed, their weapons glinting. One stepped forward, raising a blade. But before he could speak, the human's voice cut through the air like thunder. "This is my home. They are under my protection. You will not take them." The mother's breath caught. Her people had always believed humans were weak, yet in this moment, he stood unshaken, a wall between her and the storm. The tension thickened until even the fire inside the cabin seemed to quiet. The leader growled, "Very well, then you die with them." He lunged forward, but the human was faster. In a single motion, he grabbed a heavy piece of wood from beside the fire and swung it with brutal strength. The clash echoed through the cabin as the intruder staggered back, stunned. The other two hesitated, doubt flickering in their eyes. The human's stance, his fearless defiance, was not what they had expected. He did not look like prey. He looked like a predator protecting his own. The leader spat blood, snarling, "This isn't over. We'll return with more." With that, he motioned to the others, and they retreated into the snow, their shadows swallowed by the white wilderness. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of the fire. The human lowered the makeshift weapon, his chest rising and falling steadily. He closed the door and set the bar back in place. For a moment he simply stood there, the weight of what had just happened settling into the small cabin. The mother stared at him, her lips parted. She had expected death, yet he had chosen life, not just for himself, but for her and her child. Her throat tightened as she whispered, "You could have let them take us. You could have saved you." Self. He turned to face her, his expression steady. "And what kind of man would I be then?" Tears welled in her eyes. She pressed her forehead to her child's, whispering softly, "We're safe. We're truly safe." For the first time, she believed her own words. The child stirred, his small hand reaching toward the human. The man crouched down, allowing the boy to grip his finger once more. This time, the boy's laughter filled the air, bright and unbroken. The mother's heart swelled at the sound. She realized then that this was more than survival. It was a chance for something new, something she had thought impossible. She met the human's eyes, her voice trembling but strong. "You've given us more than life. You've given us a future." The human said nothing, only nodded, but in his silence she felt the promise. He would not abandon them, not now, not ever. Outside, the world was still cold, still cruel. But inside the cabin, hope had been born anew. A mother and her child, once lost to despair, now stood at the edge of a new beginning, guarded by a human who had chosen to stand with them. And in that fragile warmth, the alien mother finally allowed herself to dream, not of endings, but of tomorrow.